So imagine you're walking into like this massive global arcade, right? You want to buy electronics, trade wheat, or I don't know, secure energy. But there is a catch. You simply cannot play the game unless you use the arcade's mandatory tokens.
Right, you have to buy in first.
Exactly.
Oh.
And today's deep dive explores this theory that the US dollar operates well, exactly like those arcade tokens. We are breaking down a video by Financial Mysteries that claims America's entire superpower status actually hinges on this secretive 1974 deal that basically forced the rest of the world to use them.
It's a super fascinating premise. I mean, the source essentially argues that modern U.S. foreign policy is built, almost entirely around protecting this specific financial setup.
Which, let's be real, is a pretty heavy politically charged claim. Just to be completely clear for you listening, we're not endorsing the video's views on military motives or taking sides today. We're just impartially unpacking the ideas exactly as the source presents them. So let's look under the hood here. Break this down for me. If Japan wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, why do they need U.S. dollars to do it?
Well, that goes back to that 1974 blueprint. The U.S. offered military protection to Saudi Arabia and eventually the broader oil coalition, OPEC.
Okay, so protection in exchange for what?
In exchange, those nations agreed to price their oil exclusively in U.S. dollars. So Japan can't just hand over yen for oil. They have to acquire U.S. dollars first.
Right, so the whole world is basically forced to stockpile dollars just to keep their economies running. But what happens to all that cash once it actually hits the Middle East?
And that is the absolute genius of the system, which is often called the petrodollar. The agreement stipulated that these oil-rich nations take their massive surplus of dollars and invest them directly into U.S. Treasury bonds.
Oh, wow. So they just...
They essentially loan the money right back to the U.S. government, yeah.
Wait, let me make sure I'm really getting this. The U.S. prints paper dollars, uses them to buy real tangible goods globally, and the countries receiving those dollars are obligated to loan them back to the U.S. I mean, doesn't that make the dollar the ultimate cheat code?
The video argues it is exactly that. Because there's this constant guaranteed global demand for U.S. debt, the U.S. government can borrow astronomical amounts of money at, incredibly low interest rates.
Which lets them run massive trade deficits without completely crashing the economy.
Exactly. It funds everything. Plus, it gives the U.S. total geopolitical control via systems like SWIFT.
Right, and if the setup is that much of an advantage, no one in power is going to just let it slip away without a fight.
No. Definitely not. And the theory points to several historical moments to back that up. The video claims that leaders who tried to bypass the petrodollar faced pretty severe consequences. Like in 2000, Saddam Hussein tried selling oil in euros.
Right.
And later, Muammar Gaddafi proposed a Pan-African gold dinar to bypass Western banks entirely. The video's thesis is that both leaders were overthrown by U.S. and NATO military interventions specifically to protect the dollar.
Wow. But okay, if brute force kept the system intact back then, what shifted to make the dollar vulnerable today? Why are we seeing cracks now?
Well, the source suggests the vulnerability didn't come from a rival military, but actually from the U.S. overplaying its hand. By using the dollar as a weapon, heavily sanctioning nations like Russia and Iran, it proved the dollar isn't neutral.
So holding dollars suddenly carried a massive risk of your accounts just being frozen.
Exactly. And when that happens, other nations start building alternatives. China built CPS, which is this entirely separate payment network to trade oil in yuan. Central banks started aggressively hoarding gold.
And didn't Saudi Arabia join BRICS in 2023?
Yes, the economic coalition of emerging nations actively trying to move away from Western financial dominance.
It's like they decided to build a totally different arcade.
That is a perfect way to put it. Which brings us to the breaking point. The source highlights February 28, 2026.
Right, the catalyst.
Yeah. A joint U.S.-Israel strike on Iran, dubbed Operation Epic Theory, shuts down the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay, I get that stopping oil shipments causes a massive global energy crisis, but how does that instantly break the U.S. bond market?
Think about that automatic recycling loop we just discussed. Billions of dollars flow into the Middle East for oil and then flow immediately back to the U.S. Treasury to buy debt. When the strait closed, the physical oil trade stopped entirely.
Oh, meaning the cash just stopped moving. It's like a clogged artery in the global financial heart.
Yes. Investors fled to the dollar for safety, but the halted oil trade meant dollars actually stopped recycling into U.S. debt.
Because if the oil stops, the dollar stopped flowing into Saudi Arabia, which means Saudi Arabia stops buying U.S. Treasury bonds.
Exactly. And suddenly, The U.S. government holds a bond auction to fund its massive deficit, and its biggest automatic buyers are just missing. Without that constant buying pressure, the Treasury has to dramatically raise interest rates to attract anyone willing to buy that debt.
So borrowing costs for the U.S. government just explode overnight, making the national debt nearly impossible to service.
That is the core argument, yeah. If the petrodollar recycling loop dies, the artificial global need for U.S. debt basically vanishes with it. It really forces us to question the stability of this whole global financial architecture.
It's pretty wild to think about. Connecting all these dots for you listening, if the petrodollar dies, U.S. superpower status could genuinely crumble. As you watch these massive global alliances shift, are we witnessing the final days of a single global currency? And if that foundation cracks, how will a massive spike in U.S. interest rates change the value of the money sitting in your bank account today? Definitely something to ponder.